Have you ever wondered why it's easy for us to use ChatGPT, but much more difficult for someone like a Telugu farmer to do the same? Could it be that rather than us somehow being better than the Telugu farmer, a much saner answer would be that they just do not have the same access to English language as we do? Could it be that it's just difficult for them to use English in a professional setting and therefore much more difficult to use ChatGPT? Now, some organizations like Swecha, which is an open source software movement, the answer is simple to come up with an Indian language alternative to ChatGPT. And what they have built is a large language model called Chandamama Kadalu. And yes, if some of you recognize that name, it does have something to do with the Chandamama stories. But a little about that later. What the intention of this Telugu LLM would be is to basically allow someone like a farmer brought up in Telugu speaking area to be able to access the same kind of a job that a person in an urban area would be able to access. For example, prompt engineering. Now, prompt engineering is nothing but a kind of job where you need something like a good experience of the language and an ability to feed these kind of prompts to ChatGPT. Now, just taking English out of that equation, wouldn't it be easy for a farmer to give these prompts as well, provided that they are able to say this, interact with the LLM in Telugu instead of English? Now, this is based largely the kind of goal that Swecha is driving towards to be able to give Indic language speaking communities a chance into the IT sector, just as those in the urban areas with English speaking skills have. So here's how they went about creating this LLM because, by the way, the LLM is almost finished by now. They started by deciding the kind of data set they were. Now, ChatGPT obviously has a plethora of options because of the fact that it's using English. But for Telugu, what would be a good option? Now, what they thought of was to use these Chandamama stories. These stories, if some of you do not know, are still available online on the Chandamama archive website. And the Swecha organization basically invited a bunch of people from the IT community speaking Telugu to help them transfer these files from a PDF version into a much more machine readable version. They did this around October, November, and by now they are almost ready with this LLM. What this LLM will basically do is, for example, if you start with a prompt once upon a time, the LLM will automatically start generating a story in the Chandamama format, but possibly creating a sort of newer stories, taking from the dataset that it already has and creating a story of its own. So Chandamama Kadalu is not the entire LLM that Swecha is working on. It's actually part of the larger LLM, which is the Vemana LLM, that will actually hopefully help the Telugu community uh, be able to access jobs, be able to access the same information that we are able to access via ChatGPT. And so you can imagine that there are a lot of perks to this kind of a software for the local people. Now, is there a perk for this kind of an LLM for the industry stakeholders? Well, we talked to some of them and the response seems divided. Some feel that ChatGPT is already there, it's already working on its versions, so maybe it's a little too little less. Others think that, you know, the Indian community coming up with this kind of an LLM, it's going to be much more sophisticated. It's catering to a much larger demand, and it's going to be likely going to be much less costlier. So we'll have to see how it works out in the end. But at least in terms of the kind of impact it's going to have, Switch has definitely impressed a lot of people in the sector by trying to come up with its own Indic version of ChatGPT. There are also other issues that ChatGPT is going to, that the Telugu version of ChatGPT, Chandamama Kadalu, or even Vemana is likely to have. For example, they have to figure out what kind of GPU or AI chips they will use instead of the ones that are used by ChatGPT. They'll have to work out how they're going to create security measures. For example, ChatGPT has a red team to make sure something like CSAM content doesn't come up for the people using ChatGPT. And another interesting issue that might come up for Chandamama Kadanu specifically would be the issue of copyright. Now, Chandamama Kadalu is going to use a lot of data from pre-existing Chandamama Kadalu stories. So do you think that if it creates stories of its own by following this Chandamama format, do you think it's violating the copyright act that Chandamama magazine has? Now, if you want an answer to this question, you'll have to read our story, which is on MediaNama website. And for more stories related to copyright, please do subscribe to MediaNama.